My name's Emma. I'm a student nurse in my third year of training and I'm currently on my elective placement. So to evidence one of my SMART outcomes, which was to learn more about the anatomy and structure and function of the human eye, I decided to do something a little bit different that I have never tried before, and I'll explain why. So basically, while I've been on placement, the team have given me access to this model here, which they've lent to me very kindly. And I found that being able to physically deconstruct and look at the different components of the eye and kind of put it all back together again has just really helped me to solidify my understanding and to be able to kind of visualize it all a bit better and just learn it a bit better. And I really wanted a way to evidence that, and I thought, what better way than to make a video about it? So that's what I've done. I'm also kind of hoping that it can serve as maybe a resource to other students to potentially support and further their learning about the eye if they're interested, because I think that's something that I would have been quite interested to see. I mean, I did have a look at some videos on the internet before I made this, but they were more using real eyes as opposed to models such as this one. It's a very brief overview because I obviously couldn't include all the fine details in a video because it would have been extremely long. I have completed some other resources to further evidence that though. So this basically is just a very basic kind of overview of what I've learnt about the eye and the structure and functions of the main components. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the outer layer of the eyeball, which is called the fibrous layer. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the cornea, which is actually missing on this model, but it should be on the central area of the front of the eye, just where I'm gesturing now with my finger. To replace it, imagine just a clear convex shield covering this portion of the eye. So what the cornea is it's a clear convex structure of varying thickness, and what it does is it helps with the image forming process by refracting the light as it enters into the eye. In terms of scale, the average diameter, which is from here to here, of a human person's cornea is about 8 millimeters, but obviously this does vary from person to person. Next, we'll move on to the sclera, which is the white areas of the eye. This is what we call the whites of the eye, and what it basically is the tough sheath forming the outside of the eyeball. It's dense and fibrous in structure, and it's got a lot of collagen in it. This helps to keep it tough, and it basically provides some protection for the eyeball against trauma and other types of physical injury. We've also got some muscles on the outside of the eye, which are on the top, the two sides, and down below. So the top one just here that I'm pointing to now is called the superior rectus, and what that does is it moves the eyeball upwards. The inferior rectus, which is down below just here, is similar, but it pulls the eyeball downwards. On this side of the eye we have what's called the medial rectus, and this, to give you an idea of where it is, that's the side which is closest to the nose. So what that one does is it pulls your eye in towards your nose. This one is the lateral rectus, and that does a similar thing, but again it moves away from the nose instead of towards the nose. Also at the top, this white one here, we have the superior oblique muscle. This is an extraocular muscle which travels through the trochlea in the orbit of the nose and attaches to the top of the eye. It rotates the eye inwards. At the bottom, this one here, we have the inferior oblique. This is also an extraocular muscle, but this one arises at the front of the orbit near the nose and travels backward and outward in the orbit before attaching to the bottom of the eyeball. This one helps to move the eye outward along the axis from the front to the back. At the very back of the eye, if we just turn this around, we have the optic nerve. This is the nerve which is responsible for your vision. Each nerve contains approximately 1 million fibres for transmitting information from the eye to the brain. So there we have the fibrous layer. Moving on, we now have the vascular layer, which contains the iris, the pupil, and the ciliary muscle. If we start off with the iris, which is this coloured section here, it's the coloured part of the eye, and what it is it's a diaphragm of variable size, the main function of which is to adjust the size of the pupil to basically regulate the amount of light which enters the eye. The pupil is this part in the middle. It's basically a hole, and this hole allows light into the eye. The pupil changes according to the changes of the iris. So for example, if the iris enlarges, the pupil constricts, and vice versa. The next thing I want to talk about on this layer is the ciliary muscle. This is the white area here. It's basically a ring of smooth muscle attached to the iris, and what it does is it helps to control accommodation of the lens. Accommodation of the lens is when the lens changes shape in order to alter the refraction of light entering the eye to maintain a clear image or focus on objects at varying distances. So as the distance of an object changes, lens accommodation is basically what allows you to remain focused on that object. Finally, we have this. If you have a look at this layer here, the brown part is called the choroid, and this basically gives the eye a dark colour and prevents any disruptive reflection in the eye, and also absorbs any unused or excess radiation. These blood vessels here supply retinal cells with oxygen and remove the waste products of respiration. So there we have the vascular layer. If we move behind the iris, what you'll find is the lens and the vitreous body. So first of all, I'll talk about the lens. That is this part here, and what that is it's a flexible and transparent biconvex structure. As you can see, when I turn it to the side, it's flatter on the anterior side than it is on the posterior side. And the function of this is alongside the cornea to refract the light as it enters the eye, to then be focused on the retina at the back of the eye and in the end form an image. So that is the lens. This just behind it is called the vitreous body, and what that is a transparent, colourless, gelatinous mass, and it basically helps to keep the retina in place by pressing it up against the back of the choroid. If I just move this out of the way, that might help to give you an idea of how that works. So finally we have the nervous layer, which is the innermost layer of the eye, the main component of which is the retina. The retina is this orange section here, and the best way to think of the retina is kind of like a screen at the back of your eye where the image is eventually formed. How that works is it contains these photosensitive cells called rods and cones, and what they do is they detect light in the eye and they convert it into nerve impulses, which are then carried to the brain via the optic nerve, which is, as you can remember, just here at the back. Where the optic nerve is, this small area, this circle here, if I maybe put these together you can get a better idea kind of where those conjoin, where that circle is, that is called the papilla, and it is what we call the blind spot, because there are no cones or rods in this area because the space is occupied by the optic nerves, and because there are no because there are no rods or cones, there's no impulses generated there, and there's no light detected there, so there's basically just a gap in the information, and that is what we know as the blind spot. So hopefully that helps to give a kind of comprehensive overview of the eye. Obviously this model does not contain every last detail. Some of these details can be better explained in a diagram. I just found that the physical model helps to kind of give you some perspective about what you've learnt, and to be able to kind of visualize it a little bit better and have a better understanding of the structure.